Screen, just letting you know that we are recording today, and we should be good to go. All right. Okay, so hello again. My name is Lacey Niemeyer-John. I am the Director of Alumni Career and Professional Development, and we are really excited to have you join us today for our Alumni Career Webinar. And we are going to be focusing on ditching the negativity bias and gaining the happiness advantage. And Dr. Leslie Bosch today is joining us, and she's going to be running us through some of the exercises and expertise that she has in this area. So again, if this is your first time joining us, this is a webinar series that is free and put on by the Alumni Career Lab. And we try to bring in alumni and other industry experts to speak on a variety of industry and professional development topics for you as you look to navigate and manage your career. So today's presentation is going to be recorded, so we will have it archived on our Alumni Association website for you to access on demand if you want to come back and look at some of the notes or refresh some of the points that we're going to be talking about today. You can find the link and more webinars on our website at arizonaalumni.com/careers. And I know many of you will probably have questions today, so we will have time for Q&A at the end. But if something comes up during the meeting, go ahead and drop it into the chat. We will be monitoring that and try to get to as many questions as we can at the end. And with that, let's get to our speaker today. So Dr. Leslie Bosch is joining us. She is a developmental psychologist and a national board certified health and wellness coach. So Dr. Bosch received her training from the Andrew Weil Center for Integrative Medicine. And in addition, she earned her Ph.D. in Family Studies and Human Development from the University of Arizona. So with that, Leslie, thank you so much for joining us today. I'm going to stop my share so that you can share your slides and take the presentation from here.
Thank you so much, Lacey. I really appreciate the opportunity to be here with everyone. I appreciate your attendance and your interest. It's so fun to be a part of this alumni, whatever it is, event. So thank you. I really appreciate it. So welcome to my presentation entitled Ditch the Negativity Bias and Gain the Happiness Advantage. So here's what I've got in store for you today. Can you see my presentation okay, Lacey? Okay. So first, I'll briefly introduce myself and my business, and then I'll cover the 5 stages of the response system. Then I'll talk about 7 universal emotions and share the 10 emotions associated with flourishing. And in that, we'll talk about the negativity bias and the happiness advantage. And then I'll show you how you can build a bridge from negativity to positivity. And finally, I'll guide you through a gratitude meditation. So by way of introduction, briefly, before I became a coach, I was like many Americans. I was working long hours in a very demanding job. And unfortunately, I was also mismanaging my stress. In fact, I didn't even know that stress management was a thing. I, of course, was eating lots of junk food. I wasn't exercising. I was sleeping poorly. I was tense all the time. So I was often arguing with my husband. I was getting tension headaches, and I certainly wasn't having any fun. I didn't realize it at the time, but I was inadvertently trading my well-being, my health, and my relationship satisfaction for success in my career. Does that sound familiar for anyone here? Fortunately, I came across a wellness class offered through the Andrew Weil Center for Integrative Medicine, where I learned about an integrative approach to health. Briefly, an integrative approach to health and wellness recognizes the interdependence of 7 core areas of health, including sleep, movement, nutrition, relationships, resiliency, spirituality, and environment. Now, during the class, as you can imagine, my homework was essentially to clean up my act in all these core areas of health, which I did. And after several months of concerted effort, thankfully, I began to feel better. I lost some weight. I started sleeping better. I felt more calm, rested, and energized, and I was feeling more connected to my husband. I was so happy with my results that I took my efforts to the next level and became a national board certified health and wellness coach. And now I work with others to improve the quality of their lives too. One of the biggest changes that I made to my lifestyle was in the area of resilience and stress management. I really didn't understand the degree to which stress was really wreaking havoc in my life. And I think in part we don't really recognize that because as much as we are starting to now, because the science is really in. And the science really clearly indicates the connection between chronic stress and a lot of negative health outcomes. So these are some of the things I really have dedicated myself to helping people understand and getting the word out that stress is a thing in our lives and we can never get away from it, but we can find better ways to deal with stress so that we can eliminate some of those negative effects of stress. And in fact, I created an entire program called the Stress Reset Program that consists of 5 science-backed strategies designed to help you optimize your response to stress so that you can, again, minimize those negative effects of stress. And essentially, the program shows you how to keep an eye on your stress levels, how to regulate your emotions, how to apply your signature strengths and core values, how to achieve and maintain a flow state, and how to talk to yourself in ways that promote mental agility and emotional well-being. And in turn, your new system for managing stress will serve to underpin your mental and emotional health, which allows you to bring your best self to any situation. Today, I'll be talking about one of those 5 science-backed strategies that will help you regulate your emotions. So as we said, you can ditch the negativity bias and gain the happiness advantage. I just wanted to show you that lots of people have successfully completed the program. In fact, here's just a few of my amazing clients. And like me, my clients were struggling to minimize the negative effects of stress on their mental, emotional, and physical health, which was affecting their quality of life and productivity. But with the stress reset method, they were able to deal effectively with a variety of stressful situations, such as dealing with ever expanding work demands. How many can relate to that? Having difficulty sleeping, dealing with a new health crisis, passing a high stakes exam, making a difficult decision, dealing with conflict, adjusting to a new leadership position, negotiating a raise, dealing with presentation anxiety, working with a difficult boss, caring for sick parents, transitioning to retirement, and ultimately prioritizing self-care. So now that you know a little bit about me and my business, let's start our discussion about emotion regulation. We're going to begin by situating emotions in a larger response system. According to cognitive appraisal theory, there are 5 stages to any response. First, you're presented with an event. You may or may not have any control over the event. Then you give meaning to the event through your thoughts. And typically your thoughts are evaluations of the event, evaluations that are based on answers to questions like, is this event desired? Yes or no. Then your thoughts give rise to your emotions, and stress is typically a combination of negative emotions like fear, anger, and sadness. Then your emotions drive your behaviors, which include everything you do and don't do. Now, importantly, research indicates that you're more apt to engage in healthy behaviors when you're feeling positive emotions and unhealthy behaviors when you're feeling negative emotions. And finally, your behaviors drive your results, which are the effects of all your healthy and unhealthy behaviors. In this way, events set off a chain reaction that's akin to a domino effect. People often recognize some stages of the response system, such as the event and their behavior. However, other stages often go undetected, powerful stages like your thoughts, your emotions, and then ultimately your results. So for example, your response begins with an event, such as a change in your duties at work. Then you have your thoughts about the event, where essentially you ask yourself the question, is this event desired, yes or no? If yes, then you're more apt to feel a positive emotion like happiness, interest, or gratitude. Then research suggests that you're more apt to engage in healthy coping behaviors, such as eating nutritious foods, exercising, and getting a good night's rest. Then you're more apt to achieve your desired outcomes, such as living a long and healthy life. However, if the answer to your evaluation is no, this isn't a desired event, then you're more apt to feel negative emotions like anger, fear, and sadness. Then research suggests that you're more apt to engage in unhealthy coping behaviors like eating junk food, spending too much time watching TV, isolating, and sleeping fitfully. Then, of course, you're more apt to achieve undesirable health outcomes like weight gain, high blood pressure, and ultimately heart disease. So this is why emotion regulation is a vital aspect of any wellness routine. Because when you're stressed, you feel lots of negative emotions like fear, anger, and sadness, which could lead to unhealthy behaviors, which could ultimately lead to undesirable health outcomes. Now, the power of this 5-stage approach to any response is that it allows you to intervene or make a change anywhere along the chain reaction. Now, today, we'll talk about how you can intervene at the emotions stage. To do this, I'll begin by reviewing the 7 universal emotions based on more than 40 years of research by psychologist Paul Ekman. As we go along, you'll have a chance to perform a mini self-assessment of the emotions that you typically experience throughout your day. So you might want to grab a pen and paper so that you can make some notes. You'll also have a chance to guess the emotion based on a picture before I reveal the answer. So are you ready? Okay, great. Here we go. Here's the face of the first universal emotion. So please make your guess. This is the face of anger. Anger arises when we sense that we're being blocked from pursuing a goal or being treated unfairly. We experience emotions more or less intensely. So as this figure illustrates, the least intense emotions appear on the left and the most intense emotions appear on the right. So lower degrees of anger include annoyance and frustration. Moderate degrees of anger include exasperation, argumentativeness, and bitterness. Higher degrees of anger include vengefulness and fury. So now ask yourself, how frequently do you typically experience anger on a scale from 0, which is never, to 10, which is always? Then ask yourself, when you're angry, what intensity of anger do you typically feel? Is it low, medium, or high? So here's the next universal emotion. Go ahead and make your guess. This is the face of disgust. Disgust arises when we perceive something offensive, poisonous, or contaminating. We can feel disgusted by things. We can feel disgusted by the actions and appearance of other people. We can feel disgusted by ideas. Again, we experience disgust more or less intensely. So lower degrees of disgust include dislike. Moderate degrees of disgust include aversion, distaste, and repugnance. Higher degrees of disgust include revulsion, abhorrence, and loathing. So again, ask yourself, how frequently do you typically experience disgust on a scale from 0, which is never, to 10, which is always? And when disgusted, what intensity of disgust do you typically feel? Is it low, medium, or high? So this is the next one. Go ahead and make your guess. This is the face of contempt. Lip smacking and eye rolling are also good indicators of contempt. Contempt arises in the presence of something you find substandard. When contemptuous, we can feel morally superior to another person or group of people and their actions. Again, contempt and disgust are related but different. In disgust, the aversion causes us to move away from the source, whereas in contempt, we don't necessarily want to remove ourselves from the situation. Also, disgust, because contempt can feel powerful. When we feel contemptuous, we can feel powerful. Whereas with disgust, we typically don't feel good. It creates very unpleasant sensations in our body. And when extreme, it can lead to nausea. Again, sensations of contempt can lead to feelings of power. So here's the next universal emotion. Go ahead and make your guess. This is the face of fear. Fear arises with the threat of harm, whether real or imagined. Fear plays an important role in keeping us safe as it mobilizes us to cope with potential danger. However, fear can also become problematic when we imagine the worst, such as failure. Fear of failure can prevent us from engaging in the necessary actions that would lead to success. Again, we experience fear more or less intensely. Lower degrees of fear include trepidation. Moderate degrees of fear include nervousness and anxiety. Higher degrees of fear include dread, panic, horror, and terror. So how frequently do you typically experience fear on a scale from 0, which is never, to 10, which is always? And when fearful, what intensity of fear do you typically feel? Is it low, medium, or high? Here's the next emotion. This is the face of sadness. Sadness arises when we lose someone or something important. Of course, what's deemed important varies greatly based on personal and cultural values. Sadness signals the need to receive help or comfort. We experience sadness more or less intensely. Lower degrees of sadness include disappointment and discouragement. Moderate degrees of sadness include helplessness and hopelessness. Higher degrees of sadness include misery, despair, grief, sorrow, and anguish. So how frequently do you typically experience sadness on a scale from 0, which is never, to 10, which is always? And when sad, what intensity of sadness do you typically feel? Is it low, medium, or high? Here's the sixth universal emotion. This is the face of surprise. Surprise arises when we encounter sudden and unexpected sounds or movements. It's the briefest of the universal emotions, and surprise functions to focus our attention on determining what is happening and whether or not it is dangerous. And here's the final universal emotion. And this is the face of happiness. We experience happiness more or less intensely. Lower levels of happiness include sensory pleasure, joy, and amusement. Moderate levels of happiness include relief, peace, and pride. Higher levels of happiness include wonder, excitement, and ecstasy. So how frequently do you experience happiness? On a scale from 0, which is never, to 10, which is always. And when happy, what level of happy or intensity do you typically feel? Is it low, medium, or high? Now we're going to take our exploration of happiness a bit further. Friedrichsen, a happiness researcher, identified 10 positive emotions associated with flourishing, and they are inspiration, hope, pride, interest, love, awe, amusement, joy, gratitude, and serenity. Positivity researchers call this the happiness advantage, because our brain at positive performs significantly better than at negative, neutral, or stressed. When you're experiencing positive emotions, your intelligence rises, your creativity rises, and you have more energy. However, research shows that only about 20% of the population operates at an optimal 3-to-1 ratio of positive to negative emotions. The tendency to focus on the negative is called negativity bias. And it's kind of just a built-in default mechanism for human beings, because essentially our brains are designed to solve problems. So we're looking for things to fix, not things that are already working perfectly, right? And you can tell that based on the 7 universal emotions, it's little wonder that we could fall into negativity when most people would classify 6 out of the 7 universal emotions as negative. So if you're anything like me, based on your mini self-assessment, you might be shocked to discover the degree to which you've been hijacked by the negativity bias. When you're stressed, you can bet that you're feeling one or more of these negative emotions. Based on your mini assessment, when you're stressed, which negative emotions are you most apt to be experiencing? Again, if you're anything like me, you're apt to be experiencing some blend of fear, anger, and sadness. But primarily, I tend to feel fear in the form of like that anxiety, typically fear of failure and the undesired consequences with failure. So what can you do to escape the negativity bias and gain the happiness advantage? Well, you can intentionally take steps to build a bridge from negativity to positivity. And how can you do this? Well, let's take a moment and pick a stressful situation. Let me give you a minute to think of that. It doesn't have to be anything that's, too intense, but just something that's pestering, something that's making you feel a little stressed. And now consider the following questions. What do you find inspiring about the situation? Now, at first, these questions might feel strange, but just give your brain a chance to find an answer. And you might want to take some notes, because this will be for you a real resource exercise. What about the situation gives you hope? What about the situation makes you proud? What about the situation do you find interesting? What about the situation do you love? What about the situation fills you with awe, amazement, or wonder? What about the situation do you find amusing? What about the situation makes you joyful? What about the situation leaves you grateful? And what about the situation makes you serene or calm? So hopefully that little exercise started to lift your spirits and helped you to think about the situation a little differently. Although we tend to think of emotions as positive and negative, in truth, all emotions have their place as they serve two primary functions. Emotions serve to sustain and to signal. So according to the happiness advantage, primarily you want your efforts to be sustained by positive emotions such as interest, hope, love, and gratitude. And then from time to time, from that place of positivity, you'll notice signaling emotions, which are typically negative, such as fear, anger, and sadness. And again, to review, as signaling emotions, anger signals the presence of goal interference or injustice. Disgust signals the presence of something offensive, poisonous, or contaminating. Contempt signals the presence of something you find substandard. Fear signals threats, including the threat of failure. Sadness signals the loss of someone or something important, and surprise signals the presence of something unexpected. So these signaling emotions, which are often negative, alert you to the values and needs that require your attention. But once you've become aware of what values and needs require addressing, then you'll want to build a bridge from the negative emotions back to the positive emotions so that you can engage your healthiest coping strategies. So how might you build a bridge from negativity to positivity? Well, for example, say someone like your spouse is starting to get under your skin, right? Instead of giving into the negative bias, before responding, you could think about all the reasons you're grateful for them in order to generate feelings of gratitude. Or you could take an interest in what they're thinking or feeling in order to generate feelings of interest. Or you could think about all the reasons you're proud of them in order to generate feelings of pride. So intentionally inserting questions that can elicit positive emotions into your response sequence can counteract the negativity bias and give you the happiness advantage, which again will increase your capacity for creative problem solving. So noticing when you're feeling negative emotions and intentionally generating positive emotions is one way you can regulate your emotions in order to gain the happiness advantage when you're feeling stressed. So are there any pressing questions that people have?
Thanks, Leslie. I don't see any in the chat just yet. But there are some questions that have come up through the registration. And I think one ties specifically to where you're talking about right now in terms of building that bridge. But could you maybe speak more to the tips and tricks to kind of manage stress and to get past those stress responses so that you can maintain that positive attitude?
Yeah, that's great. So yes, today we're sort of talking about one of those tips and tricks. And one of them is definitely, as we mentioned, to remember the response system and to understand how it is that you can intervene, that your thoughts, your evaluations are triggering your emotions, and that your emotions can be negative or positive depending on how you interpret what the event means for you. A lot of times, one of the quickest ways is to basically say to yourself, this is an opportunity, even though it feels like it's like, another thing to do. You can say one of the smallest, subtlest tricks is really to say, rather than like a burden, it's an opportunity. And then moving to understand how you can tie that opportunity to your values. Here again, opportunity to serve others, an opportunity to cultivate my talents, an opportunity to shine, an opportunity to whatever it is that lights you up, right? But basically here, we're really talking about, you notice that you're feeling negative, and then you say to yourself, okay, which of these things, what's going on? Am I feeling angry? And if I'm feeling angry, what goal is being blocked, or what sense of injustice? This is not fair. And then move to try and add some other emotions to the mix, right? So that you're not getting bogged down in negative emotions, but rather you feel that little bit of lifting of your spirits so that you can begin again to think about, okay, what is the next thing that I can do to move myself forward rather than getting bogged down in negative emotions. And now what I'd like to do is just spend some time generating one of the positive emotions associated with flourishing, and that's gratitude. So now I'd like to lead you through a guided meditation. And in order to do this, I invite you to get comfortable. You want to put both feet flat on the floor and allow your hands to rest gently in your lap. And you just want to begin to turn your attention inward and to just begin by focusing on your breath. Just noticing where your breath is in your body. And it might be helpful to begin to sort of allow your eyes to close gently so that you can better focus on your thoughts and your experiences. In this guided meditation, we'll focus on the events, experiences, people, pets, or possessions for which we feel grateful. So let's begin with the gift of life itself, the most precious gift, the gift of a heartbeat, pumping life-giving blood to all your organs. Take a moment to give thanks for the miracle of your existence and the complex organ systems of your body. Now think about all the things we have today to make our lives easier. We flip a switch and light appears. We turn a tap and clean, drinkable water flows. We adjust a thermostat and a room grows warmer or cooler. We have a dwelling to protect us from the elements. We have a vehicle and it takes us where we want to go. We have machines that wash our clothes, and we have clothes to wear and places to store them. There are machines that store our food at just the right temperature and help us cook it without having to gather wood. We have public libraries that have thousands of books and recordings free for anyone to borrow and read. We have public schools that teach us to read and write, skills that were historically available to only a very few. Take a moment to give thanks for modern conveniences and opportunities to learn and grow. Now take a moment to reflect on all the thousands of people who have worked hard to make your life easier or more pleasant. Those who plant, grow, and harvest your food. Those who transport that food to market. Those who make email and internet access possible. Those who dispose of your trash. Those who gather news stories. Those who play sports and create art and music. Take a moment to give thanks for a democratic society and the distribution of labor. Now consider the people and pets you know who enrich your life, those who smile at you and cheer you on, those friends who support you when you need a shoulder or a hand. Take a moment to give thanks for those you hold dear, for those who make your life meaningful. Finally, take a few moments to reflect on your own personal reasons for feeling grateful in this moment. Remember, generating feelings of gratitude is a powerful resource that's always there for you to call upon. Take a moment to imagine when you might want to use this resource again in the future. In the same way that you carry a glass of water from one room to another, you can carry gratitude into your daily life. Gently bring your attention back to the presentation. So to briefly recap, we talked about positive and negative emotions and how, just like you can change the channel on your TV, you can endeavor to change the channel in your mind so that you can ditch the negativity bias and gain the happiness advantage. I really appreciate your interest and attention. So now I think we have time for questions.
Perfect. Leslie, thank you so much. I think I speak for everyone when I say that we don't take enough time out of our day to do reflective and peaceful exercises like that, and how much better we feel afterwards when we can kind of clear our mind and, like you said, feel gratitude and feel happiness and joy. And thank you for providing that opportunity. So
Thank you.
yeah, we still have a couple questions that we haven't quite addressed. One specifically looks at, we have a participant that works in the legal field, and they work in family and divorce and custody issues, and so probably a lot of stress in this person's life. And is there anything directly to maybe other careers like that where you're serving others who might be in that negativity bias, or it's a very kind of negative workspace that you might have for them?
Yeah, absolutely. Great question. Because, those kinds of situations are situations in which, things really are breaking down. And people really are having difficulty sorting themselves out. And you're helping them sort themselves out day after day after day after day. And yes, they are often in a very negative headspace. And so, yes, this speaks a lot to what can happen with compassion fatigue, because a lot of times when you're trying desperately to help them, you also can be very, very fatigued emotionally and spiritually and intellectually by the challenges that are there. So there is lots of research on compassion fatigue, but when it really becomes about with that is you have to get fierce about your self-care. You've got to get fierce, and you cannot allow yourself to let your self-care slip to the bottom of the list, because you need, they talk about put your mask on before you help someone else. You have got to have a big sense of your resources so that you can enter that fray and really sort of help those people in that crisis mode to help, center themselves, redirect their efforts, and get themselves moving in towards the things that they need to do in order to improve the quality of their life. So yes, my heart really goes out to people that are in those kinds of careers. And again, I'd be happy to talk with you about other strategies, but one of the first one that comes to mind really is that fierce self-care. And unfortunately, a lot of folks in these kinds of fields tend to let their self-care slip to the bottom of the list. And this is not a workable solution for sure.
And another question is, what about, we talked about kind of the intensity, but what about the frequency? And are there tips on how to let go of negativity when it just seems to keep coming back and back and back again? And whether it's through different events or experiences that we have that just keep coming up, or even just in ourselves, right? We keep slipping backwards into that negativity bias. What are some tips and strategies there?
Well, thank you so much. That is such an excellent question. And this is really whenever we are trying to build a new habit, and this is a new habit of catching yourself when you're starting to slip into that sort of vicious cycle, and stop yourself and start to try and spin yourself into a more virtuous cycle. This will definitely take time and effort, just like any other goal. Research indicates that it takes about 6 months of concerted effort to change a habit. And this is really a habit of mind. One of the things that, of course, you can do, one of the most important things, is to really stop and look, especially if you're having a lot of rumination going on. It's the same thing over and over and over. It's really good to stop and write that stuff down and begin to see here again, what deeper issue is that pointing to? And how can you actually try to take positive steps to deal with that deeper issue?
Perfect. We have another question that came through the chat, and talking about applying some of these techniques and strategies specifically to relationships and building relationships. And like you said, that sense of community and support. Any thoughts there?
Well, of course, a lot of what we're talking about today is emotional intelligence. And emotional intelligence is one of the most powerful skills that you can have when you're talking about relationship building. So anything that you can do to better understand your own emotions and also to better understand other people's emotions is going to give you a huge advantage. And oftentimes, again, I cover this with a lot of my clients, it's really important to make sure that you understand where the other person is coming from before you try to change something. So that's one thing. You don't want to come at the person and say, oh, negativity bias, switch it up right now. It's like, no, you want to stop and really get clear about what are you feeling, and then get really clear about why are you feeling that. Get really interested about the goals that are being obstructed. Get really interested about the thing that they've lost. Get really interested about what it is that's they're afraid, the failure that they're afraid, the thing that really is driving, again, their emotion. And then from there, again, try and help them to think about, as I helped you today, to think about some of the other emotions that they could bring to the mix. Ask them some curious questions like, well, what do you find interesting? What do you find amazing? What do you find inspiring? What do you find, right? And then help them, like you did today, to try and bring out some other facets that can help to cut that negativity.
Perfect. Well, Leslie, this has just been fantastic. Thank you so much for taking the time today, for providing this opportunity of reflection. I know we've all really appreciated it. And thanks to everyone in our audience. I do want to just share my screen real quick and show some additional resources for you. But yeah, go ahead, Leslie.
I was just going to say, and if people want to get in touch with me, please feel free to email me at leslie@boschintegrativewellness.com, and also to visit my website, boschintegrativewellness.com. There's lots of free resources on there. And also, if you'd like to schedule a call to talk with me about how I might be able to help you in your situation, you can book a call at your convenience there as well. But thank you again for the opportunity to be with you. I really appreciate your interest and your participation. And I wish you all the very best.
Yay. Thank you again, Leslie. And thank you everyone for joining. We will have the recording posted to our website there at arizonaalumni.com/career lab. And we will also send out a survey with some additional resources. So check your email soon. All right. Thank you, everyone. Enjoy the rest of your day.